Just want to quickly share a video with you all on the grace of Holy Trinity and what does it mean to us, and some of the phrases that have been thrown around by religious circles about grace and crazy grace, and is too much grace good? Does it lead to more sin? They call it heresy of hyper grace. There's so many names out there. Extreme grace, fallen from grace, and all of these things. So I want to just quickly share something that I made some time ago, but I have yet to do a recording. I may have done it before, but I just recently just felt like something in urgency to make something, because there's so much out there about grace as a theology, but there's not much about the grace, the person of Christ. John 1:12 says, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. If truth is Christ, then grace is also the person of Christ. It says the grace of Christ was appeared to us in Titus to lead us to say no to all kinds of things. So more grace is actually better for us. Hyper grace, too much grace, extreme grace, crazy grace is actually good for us. What's the proof of it? What is the evidence of it scripturally? Well, Romans chapter 5, and I believe it's in verse 18 or 20, it says, where sin abound, grace abound all the more. Grace is more powerful than sin, beloved. So if you have grace as a person of Christ, and Christ finished the work of sin, redeemed, he finished, everything was done on the cross, saying everything is finished. No more sin consciousness. Now it's the identity consciousness, who we are, sons and daughters. And that is what we are to teach and preach nowadays. So here's what says in Romans chapter 5. Verse 20, moreover, the law entered that the offense might abound. So people say, no, we got to balance the preaching of grace with law and other things. This verse contradicts that. It says sin is abounded by law. Romans chapter 7 verse 5 says that sin is aroused by law. For when we were in the flesh, the sinful passions which were aroused by the law were at work in our members to bear fruit to death. So more law preaching means more sin. More grace preaching and teaching, a thought process of more grace leads you to what? No sin. Because the grace is not theology or doctrine. It is the person of Christ. Hebrews chapter 13, it says, I believe it's in verse 20, it says, do not be led away by doctrines and teachings. It's various doctrines, but let your heart be strengthened by grace. So grace is most powerful thing on earth. So why this understanding that hyper grace and too much grace and extreme grace will lead people to sin? It is the lack of understanding. It is the non-experiential people who are saying that. People who have experienced too much grace have never concluded that. Go and look for it. Look for people who have tasted too much grace and they have found their lives to be so profoundly powerful. And so that's what I want to encourage you to be more enlightened by this whole idea of that hyper grace is actually good for you. Crazy grace and extreme grace is good for you. Now, let me get to some of the nittiness, the really good stuff about the hyper grace. What do you call when Holy Trinity, one of the Holy Trinity, the Word became flesh, Christ, when we call him Jesus on this earth, who lived here with us, who lived and died and rose again and now lives in our hearts. What do you call when Holy Trinity came down on this earth? Isn't that extreme? Have we ever thought of something like that? It's not even thinkable by people like us. This was not our thought. It was Holy Trinity's thought to come down. So Christ came and was personified, incarnated. John 1:14, the Word became flesh. The Word became flesh. Does that make sense? Isn't that extreme? Isn't that hyper? Isn't that crazy? The idea of God coming down to this unholy earth. Remember, and I may have said this before, sin was our way of being away from God. God was never offended at sin. We were, because we ate of the knowledge of good and evil. It was our making. We made sin by eating of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. We were told not to eat of, because the minute we ate, we were told that we would die or we would produce this sin consciousness. It was not a physical death. It was more of a spiritual aspect of understanding. It is not a literal, but a symbolic meaning. And that is why it says in Pauline theologies that all became alive. That is, again, it's the spiritual meaning of it. So, hyper, God, Trinity, Holy Trinity coming down to this unholy earth. Holy God coming down. Isn't that hyper? Yes, it is. So if you have a problem with hyper grace, this is what is disturbing. You don't know how much it cost for Holy Trinity to do this for you. So now the second point is he coming and dying for us. He became sin. I think 2 Corinthians chapter 5, it says, he became sin and we became his righteousness. An exchange, a barter. He became sin. He just didn't take away our sin, he became sin. Isn't that hyper? Isn't that crazy? Isn't that just radically out there idea? Of course it is. And that's why it disturbs us for our minds to understand. And that only people who have no clue will say hyper grace is a bad idea. No, it's a good thing. Because if you can say that it was my making to have holy God to become my sin and give him his righteousness, then, dear friend, you are lost and you need to get saved. So hyper grace is good. Too much grace is good. Now, number 3, he comes and now lives inside of our hearts. Holy Trinity is now living inside of you. Romans 8:11, John chapter 14, verse 23. My Father and I will come and live inside of you. The same Spirit that raised Christ from the dead is living inside of you. You and I are the temple of the Holy Trinity. We carry him. We are the Christophers. We're the bearers of him. The love, the grace, and the mercy personified is living inside of us. We no longer live. Christ lives inside of us. Father lives inside of us. Holy Spirit lives inside of us, dear beloved. Is this too much? Yes, it is. It is absolutely hyper, crazy, extreme grace. Wrapping around your brain around this? No way. So if you're understanding this from your mind, yes, it is hyper, it disturbs our core. But if you're a spirit being, and you are, doesn't matter whether you believe it or not, you're a spirit being. All people on this earth, every humanity is spirit being. We're tripartite. We have this understanding that we are made an image of the Holy Trinity. And many things happen in the process. We lost the idea. We lost the identity who we are, sons and daughters. Spirit beings, not gender-based, but spirit beings. if you want to make your gender to be exclusively one better than the other, no. There's so many people who think male gender is greater than female gender. It's just so much confusion. No, you're a spirit being first. First, you are spirit being. You are you're one. In Corinthians it says you're one. You're whoever fellowships with Trinity is one with them. One. We are one with Holy Trinity. There's no separation. So I hope this video encourages you to really try to slowly depart from the idea that hyper grace is a bad idea. It's actually not. It's such a good idea. It's not concocted by you and I or anyone else on this earth ever. This was initiated by Holy Trinity, done everything for you and I. This is why you and I are so privileged. So that's why we must be humble. That's why we must be thankful. This is why we must be joyful all the time, because Holy Trinity is absolutely in love with us. Are you getting this? Yeah. So if you believe you are raised in the heavenly places, as it says in Ephesians, then sin can never exist there. So how can you and have the sin and are seated in the heavenly places? Again, these are extreme, hyper crazy ideas created by Holy Trinity. Not you and I didn't think about this. So if it's disturbing, if your mind is disturbing, your religious mind is causing this havoc, there is a hurricane going on, that is why you have the hard time. You know, when you go to the ocean and you get a few cups or a few loads of water out of it, there's no crying of ocean saying, oh my goodness, they're taking. No, ocean is meant to be taken, used. It doesn't, God's grace is like ocean upon oceans. You can't make it bad. It is just too good. Of course, your mind can think of, oh my goodness, it may lead me to more sin. Well, your mind can, but your heart understands. Your mind does not understand the grace of God. It says in Ephesians chapter 3, 14 through 19, it's beyond our human comprehension. The love of God cannot be comprehended by your mind. It's true. Your mind makes a theology about hyper grace is against us, and crazy grace, extreme grace leads us to sin. It's a license to sin theology. All of this is all our mind concoctions. But our spirit knows more grace leads me, more humility, more of his enablement, more of his nature, more of his identity, more of being one with him, more of him communion with me, more of his spiritual, romantic love in me. This is what leads you to become an amazing person. This is what transforms our mind. Your spirit is already one. Now your mind needs to be transformed with more crazy grace, more extreme grace, more waves of ocean of grace flowing to your life, and it will change you. You can't stay too far from the ocean to not change. You will be overwhelmed. You know how small you are. You know how big grace is. You will be transformed if you live around ocean of grace. So this is the powerful thing. I hope you're thinking. I hope this really catches you. Hopefully it shakes you good in understanding that hyper grace is not bad. It's actually good. Too much grace is not bad. It's actually good. Crazy grace is not bad. It's actually good. Remember, it is that what he intended. Abundance of grace is how you reign in life, and that's found in Romans chapter 5. Read that Romans chapter 5 at least 10 times, or if you have time to read the rest of your life, never graduate out of that, and you will understand how much grace is so powerful. It says in verse 17, for if by the one man's offense death reigned through the one, much more those who receive abundance of grace and of the gift and abundance of the gift of righteousness will reign in life through the one, Christ Jesus. How will you reign? Abundance of grace and abundance of the gift of righteousness. May Trinity bless you with this enlightenment, this revelation, and may you know how much you are loved.